2, 3, 1.
Here we go again. You guys interrupt me anytime you want to. Any questions? I'll be happy to share with you whatever I've learned along the way, and maybe we all can share with each other. Wouldn't that be a better place if everybody worked with each other? I mean, a lot of times I do the videos as if I'm talking to my boys. So whenever they get older and maybe I'm not around, uh, they can look at those things and learn from them. And so I just kind of consider it as something that I'm sharing with somebody that I learned, so I'd be teaching them. It's you guys get to be a part of that also, and it's if we all did that for each other, what a good place that would be. Anyway, uh, interrupt anytime, ask any questions, and we'll talk about it. What I was talking about last time was plumbing fixtures, and I got a chance to interact with some odd ones this week. Matter of fact, this week has been a all over the place kind of week. This started off the week, finish up some electrical in a barn dominium type thing, where a guy had his house burn. It was a barn type, and then he built a new metal building. He had me come in and do the electrical, the plumbing. So anyway, we finished up the electrical and put in ceiling fans, and then so they could have light inside there. And he wanted to put plywood up, not your chipboard, but plywood that now costs about $30 something a sheet. Except he got it for 15 because it's all seconds, so that caused issues. But anyway, we got all the where it would have hung drywall, we put that plywood up, and then we went to work on a the next day. I think we worked on beginning of the day with a got the name of it's a fifth wheel that the slide out wouldn't come out, so we had to work at that to get it to come out. They had opened it up with one, didn't know it had a lock for each side, and the other side stayed locked, and it got that rectangle all cockeyed in there. And it was a competitor with Airstream, and I can't remember the name of it. It'll come to me when I'm not wanting to know. I don't care. Anyway, we went from there. We repaired a metal roof because we had some winds that hit 90 mile an hour. Actually had 2 tornadoes touch down fairly close. Didn't do a whole lot of damage, but it knocked down a bunch of big trees and it tore up just a little bit of the metal on the trim of this house. It didn't take us very long to fix. We fixed that. Then we went over to Eureka Springs and worked on a motel to start with. We were, let's see, we fixed what they call PTAC units, which are the individual units in each room. And we put 2 heaters in, two different setups, and then we put a fan motor in one. And we then went to work on fire alarm system. Couldn't figure out why the fire alarm wasn't working. It didn't have power to it. So I tracked it down, found out that it was in the panel. Somebody just took wires and put a wire knot on there, did hook them up. So whenever the fire inspector came by and said, hey, you got to have these working. Took a little bit to track it down through all the conduit and figure out which wire, because they changed colors inside the conduit from one place to the other. And then I went on to working on a toilet, fixing it, and there was a few other little things, at that motel. So we finished up that day there. And then the next day, we drove up to Cassville and we installed supply lines for a mobile home. Oh, first thing is I re-leveled it because the gentleman that put it in there had some idea, but he didn't have it level from one side to the other. It was about a ½ inch off, 3/4. And he didn't put any pier pads, which is 4 inch by 16 by 16, and there weren't none available in the town. It would cost a lot of money to pay us to drive into a town that would have them. So we put half or cap blocks or half pads, which are 4 by 8 by 16, 2 of them crossways, and then put the blocks over them, and that solved it, re-leveled it all. Then we did the supply lines. Then we did the sewer lines, and went inside and fixed water leaks and electrical problems. So we did that, um, and then we went back over to a motor home and put in a controller. A controller is sort of like a battery charger. It changes 110 to 12 volt, and it charges the batteries. And the inverter takes one 12 volt and turns it into 110. So you got an inverter and a controller. Controller is 110 to 12, and inverter is 12 to 110. So we had to, then we fixed the rooftop air on those things. It was quite a journey. Fixed a bunch of things, radio, and on and on and on. So it's kind of off the charts, a lot of different things. And it'll be this next week be the same thing. But in that home that I was talking about, we had an interesting faucet that was probably quite expensive, and the stand that went into a bowl that drops down into sticks up out of a cabinet, but it had like the old fill valves for pumping up that unloads into it. Well, they had it hooked up backwards, so that had to be straightened out. And the faucet in another one was the aerator was clogged up. So those are things I'm finding out that even though you have aerators to spread out the stream and make it look good on those faucets or those plumbing fixtures, now they're putting water savers on shower heads. Like you're trying to get wet. They're putting water savers on toilet fill valves. Okay. So the toilet's going to fill to a certain point. Why would you need to put a water saver? Well, they made a law for it. Right. So they're putting these water savers on the downspouts and inside of shower, one single handle and double handle faucets. So they get clogged easy. That means more plumbing issues with calling a plumber to come fix it or fixing it yourself. Not only the aerator now on like a kitchen sink, but also the water savers get clogged up. The little tiny holes that they put in them, so they get clogged up. So you're seeing a lot of that. I have actually run into quite a lot of fancy faucets for a very inexpensive price at Habitat for Humanity, where people donate construction items so that they can sell it and or use it to build houses for people. And so I've found some elaborately fancy faucets on broken cabinet tops. So they sell the cabinet top with that really fancy faucet for $5 on the premise that, it's no good. Well, you can take that faucet off of that broken fake marble top and put it on another top. So I've really done well at yard sales and things like that. So it's been a lot of learning. So like, they're willing to sell you plastic valve bodies, and that won't hold up very long, but it is less expensive. So I suggest that you want to look at maybe a customer review. Christina and I do that quite a bit. We look at, if we don't know the product very much, we look to see what the customer reviews are. You can count on certain people are going to always be grouchy about things, but if it's a consistent problem, it will show up in those reviews. So you might look at that when you get ready to get into a faucet. I know that the kitchen faucets with the light in it and it pulls down, it has a hose, there's a weight underneath there, and that I can see wearing the hose out and the liner for the hose and then the hose out, and the connection from it and to the spray nozzle, or quite often now they have plastic fittings, so those are issues for long lasting. I just don't see longevity from anything plastic, although you know, we're trying to talk about getting rid of oil, certain people in the world. You need to understand how many things are made of plastic, and plastic is made from oil products. So, you know, your plastic on your car, uh, your plastic, your rubber tires, all these things are made from oil. All the rubber seals, so on faucets, um, really need to stop and think about when you say you don't want to use any oil and you're protesting use of oil, and they got rubber soled shoes. They're not wearing wood shoes like the Dutch did way back in the day. You know, it's so I suggest that we're coming to a point where we can recycle, if you will, things that other people are just wanting to make their life a little bit different, have a remodel, and they get rid of all those old faucets. You can pick those up for very, very inexpensive prices. Shockingly cheap. Same with the cabinets for the faucets and the sinks. Those cabinets can be picked up for very inexpensive prices too, because people want to remodel. They don't want to throw it away. Sometimes they do. And then you've got the sinks themselves. I have noticed that the plastic sinks and the really stone sinks and fake stone sinks that are black show every kind of soap, and those plastic ones scratch quite a bit, even though they're deep and you can wash a lot of dishes. After a while they start showing scratches. And the cast iron ones are so heavy that it takes almost a crane to put them in. But they do last, but they also chip their porcelain and then they start rusting. So we have all those things to think about when we're starting to, you know, do I really like black? Because black seems to have a lot of issue with leaving rings. I would suggest you look away from black, but if you like it and you don't mind the maintenance, then you can go ahead and do that. The faucets that you have on the outside of houses, they're really pretty simple. So your real changes will be all the choices that you have, and you have a lot of them when it comes to your kitchen sink, your lavatories in the bathrooms, and your faucets for tubs and showers. My goodness, there's a lot of shower head choices. So, you know, take some time. Don't be in a hurry. See if you like the theme. I usually point people to Pinterest or Instagram to get pictures of design that they like, a particular style of a whole kitchen and or faucets. And so you got all those pictures to look at and decide whether or not you like those as opposed to others. Then you got the journey of finding the best price for it. It really helps now when we have all these faucets available online. Doesn't help the local guy, but it helps us find a fair price. The margin of profit on those faucets are usually pretty good. And you can tell that when you start looking for what that faucet costs from a internet company as opposed to a local. Of course, they have labor and an open store with air conditioning, so you can come in there and take a look at it, so you can understand why they'd be a little higher. They're like a convenience store for those type of things, so you can put your hands on them and touch them and say, it's not really what I thought it would look like online. And quite often that's the fact. I know that quite a few people like to touch things instead of just seeing them and ordering them. So you might consider that. But even still, you know, fixtures and faucets are changing not quite as fast as lighting is, but they're changing a lot. And some of them can be kind of complex to put together, and the instructions are not very good. The people who are doing the instructions are not normally people who install. they probably are listening to somebody, maybe watching a video and then writing it down. So they're not using terms properly for somebody who doesn't have the knowledge of things like they do. So those instructions can be very confusing. And that's been the case with things like right on down to automotive manuals and such. So you need to try to get an idea. That's a really neat thing about YouTube, because there's usually somebody who's done a review and put one in and said, hey, this is what I had to do. That's really cool. I think that's going to change the market for automotive manuals for sure, because people just look at a video and do it that way. And I would assume it's the same way with certain types of faucets. I didn't record anything this week because most of the people weren't really wanting that, and I was under the gun to get it done, so it was hurry without being too fast and making mistakes. That's one of the things that I have a cardinal rule of. When I start making consistent mistakes in judgment or forgetting things and have to restart, usually I figure out I need to slow down a little bit and adjust it where I don't make as many mistakes. And that would be the same thing, particularly with plumbing, because if you have a slow drip and you don't catch it, those drips can ruin your cabinets pretty quick. Particularly when most cabinets now are not made of real wood; they're chipboard or particle board, MDF, if you will, maximum density fibers, like a real fine particle board with a paper coating on it to make it look like wood. Those things don't hold up well to any kind of drip that you might get from that faucet connection. So you want to seal those things up, and when you do put it on the cabinet, you want to put a little bit of silicone on the bottom edge, and you want to clean it after you get everything tightened down. A basin wrench for faucets is gonna be your friend for kitchen and lavatory faucets. A basin wrench is a very inexpensive tool that saves you from having to reach up in there and try to be creative with a pair of pliers or channel locks. There's actually a new tool out there with a ratcheting type thing that will replace it, but that's probably got an expensive price on it. The good old basin wrench will work for many years to come. I've used them for a long time. So I don't use any of the chrome steel lines or the plastic lines. I use the stainless mesh over rubber and the chrome finish on the ends. They cost a little bit more, but you're going to spend the money now to last for probably a lifetime. I mean, there's exceptions to that. Say if you put too many things up against the hose, it can cause it to kink and have other deterioration. But generally, somebody will say, "Hey, I want to, save some money here," and I'd really encourage them not to just use the little plastic whip, because I just don't think that those last very long. And I'm worried that somebody will pull them out. I've seen them last quite a long time, but they just make me feel that the quality is off. So think about that. The cultured tops for the faucets where the sink is part of the top is really nice for being able to clean. And but those deep ones quite often make it even more difficult to put that faucet in, because the hose is getting connected and the nuts to tighten the faucet to that top. Quite often I will put those faucets on before I put the top down on the cabinet, if that makes any sense. Because then I don't have to use the basin wrench. I've already tightened it down, and then I set it and glue it in place. That works for me when I'm doing something new, but you can't necessarily pull your top off if it's already there. So, those things are challenging in their own right. So what I would suggest is, when it comes to shower faucets, is you make sure that you put the backing in it so that you can get it out. Well, what do I mean by that? There's at least a 1x, and usually I use a 2x that you fasten the shower handle faucets to, and I fasten it. If I'm going to fix that, I know I'm not going to want to go through the tub surround and tear it all up to fix it. Or maybe sometimes I can just pull the cover off, pull the handle off, pull the guts out of a single handle or even a double handle. But if there's a leak on the hose, I need to be able to get from the back side. It would be nice if you could replace all that with a piece of wood that you put screws in, so that you could pull those screws out and disconnect it. Put another one in, slip it in, fasten it again. So think about that when you go to put in that shower bathtub faucet. The garden tub faucet, they have their own little challenges too. Mostly because the handles tend to turn if you don't get them real tight. Sometimes it behooves you to put a little bit of silicone so that the handle base doesn't turn as much. Although you're going to tighten it pretty good. Silicone's your friend. You don't want that water to splash up and go down inside and mess up the floor underneath the tub, and all of a sudden you got problems with the tub settling. So those faucets, they can be challenging. Putting the right one on the right side also, they open different ways. On the single handle ones with the big faucet for the whirlpool tub or things like that, a garden tub. Those, you need to take your time with that, and I would say you need to take your time with faucets, period. I have through the years learned to be over vigilant and keep checking so that I don't have any mistakes and somehow they seem to change. I would say that some neighborhoods have higher water pressure at different times. So if everybody's using the water at the same time, you don't have as much pressure. So the pressure rises after everybody goes to sleep or goes to work, because not as many people is using that water. And all of a sudden, you've got a leak where you didn't, not much of a leak, but a little bit of a leak where you didn't have before. So be vigilant on those kind of things, checking your leaks. Those faucets can surprise you for sure. Now, when it comes to going to Walmart to buy a faucet, it can be done. Again, you need to make sure that those valve bodies are not plastic. You're getting it for real inexpensive, but a plastic one probably won't last more than 4, 5, 6 years, maybe 10 max. It won't be a lifetime choice. And you're like, oh well, I don't mind. I won't be worried about it. I'll have the money to do it. Well, as years pass, all that stuff gets more expensive. So if you get one that's going to last for 20, 30 years, that'd be the one you'd want, because then you skip all that arch of constantly increasing prices. You're doing like a right angle instead of slowly paying more and more. And having the labor's not going to be cheaper either. So if you can consider doing these things yourself as opposed to hiring somebody, you're going to save yourself a lot of money. So maybe a few tools, maybe $60, $70, maybe even $100 worth of tools. Ran into a plumber that ran a company that is doing quite well. They charge $120 an hour for one plumber. If there's another plumber there, it's $200 an hour. So how many tools can you buy for 1 hour with 2 guys? You can get quite a bit. And you can fix it right away. You don't have to wait on them to show up. So start thinking about basic things like a 2-pair channel locks, a good Allen wrench set, because a lot of times those handles are held on by Allen wrenches, and the basin wrench, which I spoke of, And if you want to get into the plumbing, getting to it and maybe changing that, you can look into a PEX crimper and use stainless steel rings, a one-handed ratchet, and that's about $60. Uh, and there's a few other small tools that you can use, but you really don't have that much expense. Where you start spending money when you're working on sinks and faucets are, tools for specialty tools for drain baskets, which obviously I'm allergic to because I'm sneezing just talking about it. But there's a wrench or two that can be specific to taking the nuts off of the bottom of the drain basket. Um, but really, a lot of plumbing doesn't really require a lot of expensive tools. They have the megaphones where you can find leaks and such as that in the ground, but that's not something you need. And all that stuff just keeps getting cheaper. So I suggest you should consider trying to do the work yourself, and don't get frustrated when you fail the first time, because if it was all easy to do, everybody would be successful. You have to work at it, pick up a little bit of a talent until until you get it. If that makes any sense, you'll get there. I promise you. It's not that one person's so gifted that you could never match them. Some people are gifted enough they pick it up quick and they go. Others take a little while. Personally, I am a slow learner. Takes me a little while, but once I got it, I got it. I would say that's probably due to my dad messing with all that lead paint. I learned in an EPA class and got EPA certification for lead paint that what it actually does is it causes your children to be slow learners. So I suggest that we look into being more than what we are. And that challenge will cause our mind to be more flexible and see things differently. Maybe even to be a totally different person. With all the alternatives that leaves us and the money that it saves us, but why wouldn't we want to be more than just a regular person that calls a plumber? Why couldn't we be that guy who fixes all the small things? You're not hooking up a filter system with a Culligan. Even that can be done. You're hooking up your supply to your faucet. You're putting in a new faucet. That's really not that big a deal. And it's not going to kill you. It's just going to get you wet at worst. Maybe if you're not paying attention to it and you got lackadaisical on it, might could cause you to have some water damage. But guess what? It happens with plumbers too, and that's why they have insurance. So let's hope that you have the courage to try it anyway. Try it on your guest bathroom, and then you say, hey, maybe I can do that elsewhere. My kitchen, my master bedroom, we can do these things, and that would just consider it an adventure. Don't put yourself in a pinch to do it where you feel obligated. So let's see, I haven't had as much confidence in things that are made in China. I don't mean to be prejudiced about that, but plumbing fixtures quite often are made very, very quickly. And I've run into faucets that leak more often. I'm not going to say that you don't with American made. You do, but it seems like faucets tend to leak that are made in China. I think it's more what we like. They don't use, and so they just manufacture it and don't really understand why we even like that type. I don't know. Maybe it's just because they're under the gun to make enough money for the company they're working for, and they're pushing them hard. I've not got a real good feeling about made in China faucets. Other things maybe, but not that. I wouldn't say you can't get a good one, but you need to keep an eye out for leaks and things like that, because that's what I've run into. Um, One of the worst ones is the faucet outside, the standalone faucet where you hook a hose up to, comes frost proof. the Chinese ones tend to leak more and more often. I don't not I, there's nothing worse
Does
than
it blow up?
digging a big old hole to put one in, maybe putting a T-post beside it, and then when you turn it on and off, it doesn't stop leaking, doesn't shut off. Because now you got to take it back and trying to convince them that there was something wrong with it when you bought it, and it's dirty and you're dirty, and now you got twice the labor to put it back in. It's not a fun thing. Same with faucets. For the longest time, I didn't like mowing, and I think they're better now. But for a while, I was buying from Lowe's and Home Depot, and mowing would have a screw missing, a little small Allen screw or screw that held the plastic pieces together. Uh, it would be little tiny items missing. They're not in the box. I'm like, holy cow! I'm pulling all the papers and making sure we didn't lose it somewhere. Like, oh my God. And then I have to drive sometimes an hour to get back there to return it. And they go, we need the whole faucet to give you another faucet. So I have to discuss that with them and say, hey, no, I'd like you to just give me a piece and then you return that one. And you have to get a manager and such. But the mowing had a problem. I don't think they do as much now. Because I haven't run into that problem, but it is memorable when you do have that problem. Let's see. I think we're coming up on remember when you're doing rigid pipe on the downspout of the faucets. Remember, you're not using that rigid pipe you're not using black iron. You're using galvanized. And you don't use galvanized on propane lines or natural gas lines because that galvanize you call a galvanic reaction. So it's galvanized with water and black iron with gas. Quite often somebody's like, "Hey, could you come over and see if you can tell me why I've got rust in the tub or the faucet? It just comes down out of there." There will be a black iron pipe somebody put. It could be a little short one that's all they had, and they didn't want to go to the store, and they put a little what you call a close nipple, which is nothing but threads, or it could be an inch and a half, 2, 3, 4 inches long. It's just one they put in to adapt one to the one supply line to another, or it's in the downspout of the bathtub. That little bit of black iron causes rust to show up, depending on where it's at. I mean, if you have it in multiple faucets, it's probably before all of them. Say, like where the supply line comes in, somebody decided to hook into a black iron pipe. Just put it here. This is what I got. Don't use black iron for water because you'll have rust coming out in your faucets that are after it. You're going to use galvanized. And I try to use PEX right up to the faucet. And I use brass fittings and stainless steel crimp rings. It's a little more expensive, but not as much as you would think. It's nowhere near as difficult as you would think either to do. PEX you can literally bend it and it'll go around a corner. You don't have to because you have the PEX fittings, like a 90 and such. So don't use anything but galvanized when it comes to rigid on your faucets. Also, you might think about the use of pipe dope. You don't need to use pipe dope when it comes to putting the threads together and there's a rubber gasket at the bottom. You're hitting that rubber gasket, that's where it seals. It doesn't seal on the threads. Pipe dope is used to, say, on a rigid pipe, it starts out smaller and gets larger. That's where you put your pipe dope or your joint compound on to tighten, because your sealant is sealing on the threads. But if you're using a flare fitting, which you see some of that in gas, where it's a rounded fitting that meets up to a rounded nut, that's where your seal is, that rounded part. It's not where the threads are. And I see people all the time putting tape on there, or that joint compound, the plumbing compound on those threads, and there's no need. That's not where it seals at. When you use your threaded sealant like that, it's for basically the rigid pipe connections where there is no rubber gasket. So what those threads are smaller at the beginning, and then they get wider or bigger as it goes back. So that when you tighten it down, it just gets harder and harder and tighter. So it's really, really tight. That compound allows you to tighten it down even further because it's lubricating it just enough, and then there's a little bit of sealant, but mostly it's a lubricant. Quite often, plumbers will tell their helpers what you need to do is tape and then pipe dope. So, oh, what's the question?
Maria 28 asked, she had heat tape put on the water lines under mobile home she manages. Did it about 4 years ago. How long will this last?
Might be time to think about getting another. But you could check it. It comes on when it gets a certain temperature, because that's when you need to check. So what you need to do is make you a checklist of things to check when it comes time for wintertime. I think maybe I ought to do a wintertime list for mobile homes, even for my own self, my own benefit. Um, you know, I've had some that last a long, long time, and then I've had some that were 2 or 3 years old and they burnt. So what you're doing is checking to see. But 4 or 5 years you need to check anyway. I wouldn't count on it.
Do you need to have a handyman go under there and check every year?
I would say yes. It's not a bad. How long does that take? Take the skirting down, crawl underneath there, and touch it when it's colder, and it should be kicked in. Doesn't take very long. 10 minutes max. If it's working, it'll be warm. I don't think it's much expense. He's going to be doing other things. You're not going to call him out just for that, unless you have a whole row of mobile homes that you want to check. And by the way, while he's under there, he can look for other leaks from the drain lines, or say a bathtub started leaking, you don't know about it. I've got a gentleman that I've got to talk to this coming week. He had a leak in his water heater. He didn't know it. The water went down. He didn't have a pan, which a lot of mobile homes don't. A lot of houses don't. And the water went down the vents, and that tells me he has a gas water heater. So, because it has fresh air supposed to come up, it managed to go down, partially down that vent and into the plastic of the mobile home, went into the belly of the mobile home, and then the water stayed inside that plastic belly because it was doing really well. It wasn't pulled down by animals, and all that moisture stayed there, and it got against the floor and caused his floor to warp up all over the place. So you're sending your guy under there to look for the heat tape, but while he's at it, he should be looking around to see if animals have got into the bottom of the mobile home, and if you have leaks dripping here and there, then he needs to explore that. I will say this: I went to one home, and I won't forget it for a long, long time. And there was this great big bubble of water that was up in the bottom of this home. And I had a friend of mine working with me. He's Jerry. And I said, Jerry, I'm going to get a block or two and lay here. Maybe that water will just go around me. He says, Mr. Bill, I wouldn't do that. I'm going to get back. So when I cut that water came out me like a bathtub. It didn't just, I thought I'd just let it leak out. It just went woof. So I got totally wet. Probably 55-gallon drum of water all at one time. So those are the things that he's going to be looking for. Sewer leaks, places where the sewer line is down. So you're supposed to go downhill, but a lot of times support, either be it from hanger or underneath, will let it bow and then come back up, and that area will fill up with solids, and it'll be hard to to flush and get things to drain out properly without plunging. That's usually the case because of that. Now, sometimes that can also be the cause of out further out the trees growing. They put their roots down inside the couplings and catch everything.
She manages 14 mobile homes.
14? Yeah, that's about what we've got. So you're sending him under there to look for a list of things. Check on the water, heat tape. Make sure he's got electricity to it, by the way, because that can be tripped, especially if it's on a, what do they call that? So that it could be tripped. So you need to make sure it has the light on and if it's getting warm. And then he's going to look for all those other problems that I talked about. Supply lines that are leaking because a mouse chewed on them. Drain lines that are leaking because of time.
Full underbelly not.
All kinds of problems. Ductwork being down. If it's, those are all things that he needs to be looking for. And if animals living under there, he'll probably know it. I pulled down skirting one time. There was a dead raccoon right there. Swelled all up and everything. So, there'll be a list of things that he would be wanting to look at.
Is there a brand of heat tape better than any other?
No, it's not enough. One of the surprises I just recently got was I crawled underneath a mobile home and there was a white bunny underneath the mobile home. He happens to be their mascot, they tell me now. So I see him whenever I work over there when I'm looking for him. It just was kind of surprised me to see a white bunny underneath a mobile home. So somebody let this pet bunny go and he's managed to survive. So yeah, you can see some pretty strange things underneath mobile homes. I was working on one house for the Office of Human Concerns, Weatherization Department. That's a long name. And they sent a guy to caulk the hole beside the door. And he must have used a whole case of caulking because the floor was rotted out beside that doorway, and all that great big glob of silicone was probably the size of a football on the ground.
Do you think replacing vinyl skirting with metal skirting is a good investment?
Absolutely. Vinyl skirting is good for somewhere between 5 to 7 years. Sometimes it has holes immediately. Rocks get thrown from a lawnmower and it'll go right through it. Weed eaters eat holes in it. Then I'll spray chemicals on it, and the chemicals will eat out the bottom of that. The wind will blow out taller vinyl skirting. It'll just bend it in the middle and then pull it out. None of those things happen with metal skirting if it's installed where it's touching the bottom and fastened at the top. It's just I've had it where it was 5 foot tall and it didn't blow out. I've had it where they ran their zero radius into it. It made a dent, but it didn't go. It was still there. So yes, it's for the long haul. You're way ahead. And by the way, it's much easier to get into than vinyl skirting. Somehow the vinyl skirting's the grass gets into it and holds on to it, and it's hard to pull out and get back in. It gets dirt all in there. It's a nuisance. Whereas metal skirting, you can pull it down to any given place and go in right there and put it right back. It's just the top plate, the Z metal, the top front. That can be a little bit of work, but it's like 4 screws and then 3 screws on the panel that you want to go into. And you got 3 foot wide. I don't even encourage people to put doors in. I can put them in, but I charge more for them because they take time to make and extra cost from the material. Not much, but some. And you can get into it anywhere. So yes, metal skirting is far superior to vinyl skirting. And by the way, I was talking to somebody who was trying to get by on a budget, and he goes, man, is there any way I can do this cheaper? I said, do you have access to uh, different colors? You know, you got somebody? Yeah, I got somebody. That's got a friend of mine's got a whole bunch of leftover pieces, but they're all different colors. Well, guess what? On the backside, they're all white. So you turn them upside down, they're all white. They're not as good a color white, but they're all white, and it will hold up. Yeah. So yes, always. And I've done metal skirting jobs that have been there now 27, 28 years. I don't have rust. I don't, they're faded some, you know, but they're not rusting. So I don't have anything that I could say that's bad about vinyl skirting. I don't have problems with them blowing out. So yeah, you know, definitely it's a good investment. Long haul, good investment.
Thanks for the advice.
You're welcome. Anytime. Uh, I usually put it around my decks too. Just kind of makes it all complete looking. Keeps animals from living under the decks. And animals tend to drag carcasses under there and trash, and people tend to just kick things under the deck when they're mowing. So it behooves you to go ahead and put that skirting around the deck also. I don't know if that's what everybody does, but I would. Anyway, I think we'll have a new subject to talk about next week. Thank you for paying attention, and I hope all of you have a wonderful time. All I'm really trying to do is share with you what I learned, and maybe my ghost will be here long after I'm gone through these videos. So I wish you all the best, and save some questions if you have for next week, and we'll talk to you next week then. Bye.